Tonight, growing outrage after revelations Alberta separatists met with officials in Donald Trump's administration.
In my opinion, that is treasonous activity, and it needs to be called out. It needs to be stopped.
Divisions over how to respond, even as Ottawa and the premiers look to project a unified front.
We expect the U.S. administration to respect Canadian sovereignty.
At Issue weighs in on the threats from inside and outside Canada. Plus, a gifted young student with a promising future now on the run, alleged to have made off with $65 million.
He was very smart. Clearly, he went on to be a very evil genius in that way.
The Fifth Estate investigation on the trail of a Canadian crypto fugitive. And how artificial intelligence can improve breast cancer screening.
We proved that this lesion was a malignant lesion.
New research into how it could save lives and money.
From CBC News, this is The National with Erica Johnson.
Thanks for joining us. Adrian is on assignment. A message of unity tonight from the Prime Minister and premiers, even amid news that some Albertans are seeking American help to pry the country apart. After confirmation that an Alberta separatist group met several times with White House officials to secure U.S. support for independence, BC Premier David Eby dubbed the meetings treason. Ontario's Doug Ford called them unacceptable, asking Alberta Premier Danielle Smith to denounce them. Ashley Burke now with Smith's response and what the Prime Minister said as his attempt to portray a united front was overshadowed by talk of separatism.
Premiers came to the table to talk tariffs and trade, but ended up facing questions about treason.
To go to a foreign country and to ask for assistance in breaking up Canada, there's an old-fashioned word for that, and that word is treason.
BC's premier condemning talks between an Alberta separatist group and Donald Trump's administration.
The officials that we've been meeting with in Washington are extremely enthusiastic about the prospect of a free and independent Alberta.
The Alberta Prosperity Project told CBC News it made 3 trips to Washington to study if it's feasible to get a $500 billion line of credit from the U.S. Money that would bankroll a new country if they ever win a referendum.
In my opinion, that is treasonous activity, and it needs to be called out. It needs to be stopped.
A senior official with the U.S. State Department confirms meetings happened, but says no commitments were made.
This is an opportunity for Premier Smith to stand up and say enough is enough. And either you're with Canada or you're not with Canada.
Premier Smith says she doesn't want to demonize Albertans expressing grievances, but expects Washington to respect Canada's sovereignty.
And that they would confine their discussion about Alberta's democratic process to Albertans and to Canadians. And I will raise that with my delegate in Washington so he can raise it with members of the administration.
Late last year, the head of Canada's spy agency said he's bracing for possible foreign meddling in sovereignty referendums. Asked if any of this constitutes foreign interference, the Prime Minister wouldn't say.
I would expect the U.S. administration to respect Canadian sovereignty. I'm always clear in my conversation with President Trump to that effect.
Trump recently called Mark Carney governor and last week posted an AI-generated image online of the American flag covering Canada and Greenland.
So, Ashley, what is the separatist group saying about Eby's comments?
Well, Erica, I spoke to the co-founder tonight. He called the premier's comments a childish temper tantrum and defamatory. He said it isn't treason to talk to the U.S. and claims they haven't directly asked for any money and that the U.S. hasn't offered any either.
Okay, thanks for this. Ashley Burke in Ottawa. And breaking tonight, Donald Trump has issued another threat against a Canadian industry, this time aviation. Posting on social media, he accused Canada of refusing to certify some U.S.-made Gulfstream jets, and in response said his government will hereby be decertifying their Bombardier Global Expresses and all aircraft made in Canada. He also threatened a 50% tariff on any and all aircraft sold into the United States of America. In Calgary, Pierre Poilievre's job is at stake as the Conservative Party convention gets underway tonight. He's expected to pass the leadership review tomorrow, but as Kate McKenna explains, quieting questions will take more than just surviving the vote.
As Conservatives kick off their national convention, grassroots members were eager to talk about Pierre Poilievre's leadership.
There's never been anyone better to represent the party.
I think for this party to move forward, we have to continue supporting the leader that is in front of us.
I'm supporting Mr. Poilievre. I think I would be surprised if he gets less than 90%.
Well, hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to Calgary.
On Friday, some 2,500 delegates will vote on Poilievre's future. The leadership review was automatically triggered when the Conservatives lost last year's election. Sources say behind the scenes, Poilievre's been meeting privately with delegates to shore up support and making this public appeal.
I'm not giving up. I don't quit. And the people of our party, the welders, the waitresses, the plumbers and police officers, the soldiers and small business people, they're the ones who I'm fighting for.
The last time a Conservative leader faced this kind of review was in 2005, when Stephen Harper had 84% approval, setting up Poilievre for a similar benchmark.
I kind of believe he will do okay. The question is, can he find a way to take that energy he still holds within the base of the party and convince Canadians outside of it that he's the best person to lead the country in the future?
I think they're in good shape. I think they feel like they're in pretty good shape.
Poilievre's former communications director says Friday's stage is a big one. And when Poilievre makes his speech before the vote, he'll be looking to convince all Canadians, not just Conservatives, he's the right choice for Prime Minister.
You're going to see, he's a relentless fighter on issues that affect ordinary Canadians, average Canadians, whether it's, housing costs, crime, cost of living, inflation, food inflation.
This is the room where it's all set to happen. This vote is a make-or-break situation for a leader in need of a win. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Calgary.
Chief Political Correspondent Rosemary Barton joins us for more on what to expect tomorrow in Calgary. So, Rosie, what will you be watching for?
Well, Pierre Poilievre, Erica, has to not only survive that review vote, which is expected, as you heard there from Kate, but he also has to find a way to improve his fortunes. Remember, the review is happening after a series of challenging moments. The election loss, of course, the loss of his own riding, losing 2 MPs to the Liberals, and public opinion polls that continue to show Poilievre remains unpopular with many Canadians. So this got to be a real page-turning moment for him. His speech will have to speak to his base and also appeal more broadly, so he'll be trying to thread that needle. It's a different context, certainly, but Stephen Harper is the last Conservative leader to survive a leadership review vote after losing an election. And remember, he went on to win the next federal election.
And then, Rosie, we have Mark Carney and the premiers trying to keep their coalition together.
Yeah, that First Minister's meeting today ended up being a discussion about external and internal threats to Canada's sovereignty, whether it be threats from the U.S. president, threat from separatist movements in Quebec and Alberta. And what we saw over the past couple of days is that while there have been some fractures in Team Canada because of regional interests, of course, there is a more united front today, along with a promise to meet regularly as the review of CUSMA gets underway with the United States.
Okay, thanks, Rosie. And Rosie is on her way to Calgary tonight for the Conservative Party convention. She'll be hosting special coverage of that leadership vote tomorrow. But before that, she'll be here with Chantel, Andrew, and Althea for At Issue. That's coming up in about 20 minutes. Ottawa says it's signed an agreement with South Korea to bring more auto manufacturing to Canada, something that's sitting well with the Premier of Ontario, home to most of the country's car-making industry.
I think that's great. Hyundai, Kia sell 220,000 cars a year, and they have no presence here in Canada.
The Memorandum of Understanding spells out the two countries' intention to cooperate on advancing a Korean automotive industrial footprint in Canada and advancing domestic EV manufacturing opportunities. Those new auto jobs can't come quickly enough for roughly 500 GM employees in Oshawa, Ontario, who are working their final shift tonight. GM says it's cutting the overnight shift, which had originally been added to meet post-pandemic vehicle demand. The union representing the laid-off workers accuses GM of shifting production to the U.S. to avoid Donald Trump's tariffs. An international search is underway for a young Ontario man accused of making off with tens of millions in cryptocurrency. Tonight, an investigation from Ioana Remiliotis and the Fifth Estate team follows his trail across the globe from a promising young student to alleged criminal.
Okay.
Our investigation took us to this apartment complex in Sarajevo.
an address linked to a young Canadian math prodigy turned crypto fugitive.
Let us just check this.
With the help of investigative journalists based here, we soon realized we were on the right track.
This person, I saw some familiar face, but
this seems familiar?
Yes.
23-year-old Andian Medjedovic is accused of stealing $65 million US in cryptocurrency in 2 separate schemes.
The curve that's defined by this equation here.
The math whiz from Hamilton, Ontario, was featured on this local channel after graduating high school when he was just 14. Authorities allege he committed his first hack when he was 18.
He knew a lot. He was very smart. Clearly, he went on to be a very evil genius in that way.
You see all of the transactions, and this is just a small snapshot.
Investigators say the hacker exploited glitches in crypto exchange platforms to siphon investors' funds.
The bottom line is these are not victimless crimes. People that have their life savings or have a big portion of their nest egg that can be taken out from under them.
Medjedovic disappeared from his family's Hamilton home 4 years ago. The Fifth Estate has discovered he's traveled all over the world using fake names and a fake passport, and that he's revealed a darker side, using racist and violent terms in his code. Medjedovic has also turned down rewards to give back the money he allegedly stole and posted he'd simply done what anyone else could do. Medjedovic is facing a civil suit in Ontario and criminal charges in the Netherlands and the U.S. American authorities believe he was recently at large in Bosnia. And while we were at that complex, the building manager told us police had been there recently too.
So, Joanna, in your investigation, have you had any contact with Andian Medjedovic?
Well, Erica, we tried. We emailed Medjedovic multiple times to get his response to the charges against him. We finally heard back a few weeks ago, and I have a copy of his email right here, where he wrote, "My only defense to the allegations is this. I'm a racist. Please include that. That's all. Thanks." And that's really the extent of his response.
Okay, thanks for this. Joanna Remiliotis in Toronto. And you can watch the entire Fifth Estate investigation, Canada's Crypto Fugitive, right now on YouTube or tomorrow at 9 p.m. on CBC Television and CBC Gem. Police in Alberta have laid charges in connection with the death of a young mother and the presumed death of her missing 9-month-old daughter.
A woman and her child should be planning for tomorrow, not being mourned today.
The body of Ayla Egotiklern was discovered in her apartment last Friday. Her daughter, Braylee, missing. The infant's father is now facing a charge of second-degree murder and 2 counts of indignity to a body. Police say they have some idea where the child's remains may be. The stepfather of 2 children who went missing in Nova Scotia last May now faces serious criminal charges. Daniel Martel was arrested Monday on charges of sexual assault, and forcible confinement. Those charges are not related to the children's disappearance. RCMP say the alleged victim is an adult. Martel appeared in national news coverage when Jack and Lily Sullivan disappeared from their rural community. For the very first time, the Trump administration is acknowledging improvements need to be made to its immigration enforcement operations in Minneapolis. The admission came from the new point person leading the mission. But as Katie Simpson found out, the claims are being met with skepticism on the streets.
The immigration enforcement operations in Minneapolis need to be safer, more targeted, and by the book, all according to the Trump administration official now running the program.
I'm not here because the federal government has carried this mission out perfectly.
A change in tone after persistent unrest in the wake of federal agents fatally shooting 2 Americans in a matter of weeks.
Safety, I hereby declare this to be an unlawful assembly.
Border Czar Tom Homan asking state and local officials to collaborate more, including allowing federal agents to access jails to pick up wanted people.
This is common sense cooperation that allows us to draw down on the number of people we have here.
Demonstrators outside the federal building where ICE operations are run are skeptical.
Well, they perpetually lie, so I don't have any trust in what they say, basically.
Some are even calling on the international community to boycott the U.S. right now.
I don't understand why
anybody would come and want to visit and spend money in this country with how they're treated.
The mayor of Minneapolis remains defiant, opposing the immigration crackdown, delivering a stark warning to fellow mayors.
This is not a time to bend our heads in despair or out of fear that we may be next, because if we do not speak up, if we do not step out, it will be your city that is next.
At the memorial site where Alex Preddy was killed, there is a lingering fear tensions will not ease soon.
Empathy and love will win in the end, but it's going to take all of us working together to prevail over all the atrocities that have happened here.
It is that sense of community, offering some comfort in this moment. Katie Simpson, CBC News, Minneapolis.
In southern Spain, survivors of a deadly train derailment earlier this month attended a memorial mass. Spain's king and queen joined survivors, local residents, and victims' families. The crash killed 45 people, injured more than 150, making it one of the worst in recent European history. A preliminary investigation points to a fracture in the rail line as the cause. The European Union has now designated Iran's Revolutionary Guard a terrorist organization in response to the country's deadly protest crackdown. It comes as a U.S. military buildup is happening in the region. Senior international correspondent Margaret Evans shows us the rising tensions.
The USS Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier, the centerpiece of what U.S. President Donald Trump calls his beautiful armada, heading towards the Middle East. A negotiating tactic, a genuine threat, or maybe both. The European Union's foreign policy chief said the region doesn't need a new war. But foreign ministers did agree to put Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps on the EU's list of terrorist organizations.
This will put them on the same footing with Daesh, Hamas, Hezbollah, Al-Qaeda.
The Revolutionary Guard is the most powerful of Iran's security forces, accused of orchestrating the attacks on anti-government protesters that have left many thousands dead. Canada declared it a terrorist group in 2024. These Iranian expats in Brussels largely welcomed the decision, criticized by some as merely symbolic.
It's a very strong signal from the European Union about in supporting of the Iranian people.
Iranians inside and out of the country are divided over U.S. military intervention.
We don't ask to start a war with Iran, for America to bomb us.
Exile Dr. Massa Moen Al-Sadat, watching from Canada, says the diaspora feels helpless.
We are a country with 2,500 years of being a country. So when we are asking for help from foreigners to come and help us, we are desperate.
It's by no means certain a U.S. strike would guarantee regime change in Iran. Washington's Gulf allies are arguing against it, and Donald Trump is now talking more about a nuclear deal with Iran than the recent violence. Margaret Evans, CBC News, London.
New research suggests AI is better at detecting breast cancer than radiologists.
They pick up things that the human eye doesn't see.
How the technological advancement could save lives. The fall of frozen juice.
I have to figure out something new to use. That's so sad.
Why the former freezer staple is becoming a thing of the past. And a song fit for a storm.
Gotta go and travel it snow.
We're back in 2.
Too heavy a load.
There's more evidence tonight that AI screenings for breast cancer better detect early stages of the disease, possibly saving lives. Jennifer LaGrassa brings us the new research findings and calls to make the technology widely available in Canada.
But when we turn on the AI algorithm,
this is what it looks like to use AI in breast cancer screening.
We see that this area is becoming with higher risk lesion score.
Radiologists at Toronto's Women's College Hospital have been using artificial intelligence as another set of eyes for about 2 years. On the left, the scans the radiologist sees. On the right, the same scans reviewed by AI.
We proved that this lesion was a malignant lesion.
Now, more research adds extra support for using AI in breast cancer screening.
What I wanted to achieve with this study is to improve the screening test for all women.
The new study divides more than 100,000 women in Sweden into 2 groups. One had their breast scans read by 2 radiologists, the standard in Europe. The other had AI sort scans based on low and high risk.
The great outcome that we have seen is very promising.
The findings show that AI is more sensitive, detecting 29% more cancer than the radiologists, and catching it before it turns into more aggressive and advanced forms, potentially saving lives.
These studies confirm that they pick up things that the human eye doesn't see.
Early detection means less burden on the healthcare system, which can translate into thousands of dollars in savings per patient, according to some experts. It also eases radiologist workload.
Healthcare and regulators have to move at the speed of cancer, not at the speed of bureaucracy.
AI-assisted breast cancer screening isn't readily available across Canada, something advocates hope to change.
We have AI helping us to identify more cancer.
It's still not a perfect tool. AI can flag false positives, but experts say over time it will become more refined and hope it lands in hospitals across the country. Jennifer LaGrassa, CBC News, Toronto.
Coca-Cola has ended production of frozen juice concentrate.
The newer clientele just goes, why is it frozen? Why would I buy it?
The factors behind the product's demise. After the break, Rosie is here with At Issue.
Hey, Erica, tonight we're going to talk about the First Minister's meeting and how politicians are responding to questions of national unity and sovereignty.
We shouldn't have groups going around the federal government's back or the province's back to negotiate something with the U.S.
How challenging is this for the premiers and the prime minister in this moment? Chantal, Althea, and Andrew join me to talk about that and more.
Elon Musk's company Tesla is discontinuing its 2 original EV models as his company pivots toward driverless taxis and humanoid robots designed to perform complex tasks. Musk told investors Tesla will invest $2 billion in his privately held AI company to further develop those products. Competition has cut into Tesla's EV sales and profit, but its stock rose on news of these new priorities. For millions of Canadians, taking a can from the freezer was at one point the first step on the way to a glass of orange juice. But now, familiar brands of frozen juice are being discontinued, the victim of falling sales and changing tastes. As Anise Hidari shows us, even if few people still buy it, many are still nostalgic about the ritual of making it.
They say nothing lasts forever, so say goodbye to frozen, canned, concentrated juice. The entire product category being discontinued in this country. Problem, over time it just lost its appeal.
The older clientele know what it is. The newer clientele just goes, why is it frozen? Why would I buy it?
Minute Maid blend juicy kinds together for a very special taste.
It wasn't always this way. Juice brands were big names. Old South, McCain, Minute Maid. But come 2026, Coca-Cola's Minute Maid is shutting down production for the US and Canada.
It's not just orange juice. Frozen 5 Alive, also dead. But alternatives like Old South or generic store brands are gone too. After investigating, CBC News found that the other main producer of frozen concentrate in Canada discontinued them last year.
In a statement, the company behind most generic brands said demand for frozen from concentrate juice has steadily declined. Many consumers have shifted towards shelf-stable and refrigerated options. And industry watchers say juice is becoming less popular overall.
So if this category is forced to reassess itself and streamline itself for profitability in a market where profitability is a challenge, Frozen concentrate is really just the one that is going to get the chop.
When both the market leaders, such as Coke, and store brands are leaving, it's a strong signal that the product is dying.
And as a product dies, so do some traditions.
Oh, we have to change our slush recipe. We have to figure out something new to use. That's so sad.
Rest in peace. It's been nice having you around.
No less than 17 sun-ripened oranges.
80 years after first hitting freezers, canned frozen juice is, well, canned. Anis Hidari, CBC News, Toronto.
Now, let's break down the news shaping our world. Tonight, Rosie's here with At Issue.
At issue, national unity. Questions of separatism dominated the First Minister's meeting in Ottawa.
I can tell you, Quebec is stronger in Canada, and Canada is stronger with Quebec. I love Quebecers.
Fueled by reports of U.S. officials meeting with Alberta separatists.
To go to a foreign country and to ask for assistance in breaking up Canada, there's an old-fashioned word for that, and that word is treason.
Alberta Premier Daniel Smith won't condemn the sentiments.
I'm not going to demonize or marginalize a million of my fellow citizens when they've got legitimate grievances. What we need to do is we need to give Albertans hope.
Well, the PM says he expects respect from the United States.
We expect the U.S. administration to respect Canadian sovereignty.
So how are political leaders responding to these questions around separatism, and how do some of these movements challenge Canadian unity? I'm Rosemary Barton, here to break it all down tonight. Chantal Hébert, Andrew Coyne, Althea Raj. So this was supposed to be a First Minister's meeting, I think, where they got updates on talks with the United States and some of the travels the Prime Minister's been doing, and all those things happened. But the vast majority of the questions ended up being about national unity and some of these threats. What did you make of the response from the premiers and the Prime Minister today, Chantal?
Well, I'll start off by saying it wasn't the theme of the meeting, and most of the questions, well, the questions were media-driven. So if you're asked and you're the premier of any province, you basically have to answer.
Right.
In the case of Quebec, there's a, cart before horse sense to this, in the sense that there will be a provincial election in Quebec in October, true. I don't know who the leaders will be for two of the three main parties, but the assumption that there will be a referendum is the assumption that the PQ will win, and that's not an assumption, despite the polls, that anybody in this province has. So to kind of say, do not vote for that party. Didn't work well, by the way, for François Legault when he tried to convince Quebecers not to vote Liberal, and doesn't work well when others say, why don't vote for that party. Then there is the Alberta things. I should say, because I covered a previous referendum, that the U.S. back then did have conversations with people from the Parti Québécois and the Separatist movement to inform their analysis of what was happening. I will also say that the context is very different this time. There has never been any sympathy on the part of Quebec Separatists for becoming parts of the U.S., and there has never been interest on the part of an administration in the U.S. for annexing part of Canada. So we're somewhere else completely.
It speaks to, Andrew, this, and Chantal's right, the questions were obviously from the media. It wasn't that they sat around talking about this all day. But it does speak to the pressures that they're all under, both from the United States and from inside Canada.
Yes, we have an administration in the United States in the last few days has been talking about not just slapping 100% tariffs on us, but sending aircraft into our airspace, and giving aid and comfort to a separatist project in Alberta. That is outrageous. The Premier of British Columbia set the cat amongst the pigeons by calling the behavior of these right-wing loons who went down there to meet with them treasonous. I think treason has a very specific definition that I don't think this meets, but it's certainly clear that they would like to break up the country and therefore cause us material harm. And the novelty here is that they now seem to be conspiring with an erstwhile ally. So it's outrageous behavior on the part of the Trump administration. It, I think, deserves a much stronger rebuke than it got of the Prime Minister simply saying he expects them to respect our sovereignty. It's clear that they don't respect our sovereignty, and this is simply one aspect of it. That's what I mean. We have the novelty that we now have not one but two secessionist projects in the country. Again, as Chantal is right to say, both of them of uncertain prospects. But to have both of them, and to have at least one of them having the tacit or overt support of the President of the United States takes us into absolutely new territory.
Althea, how would you characterize what we're seeing?
I agree with Andrew on the Prime Minister's response. I think you can qualify it as weak sauce. I mean, he just went to Davos and basically said that the Americans were impeding on our sovereignty, and then turns around and says he expects the Americans to respect our sovereignty. Didn't make a lot of sense. I was a little surprised by Premier Smith's comments. Not that I don't think anybody was asking her to demonize Albertans who support the separation movement or who share some of the grievances that are expressed by those who support sovereignty. But the way she answered the question kind of called into question the grievances vis-a-vis Canada, whether Canada deserves to exist as it is. And, you know, I think a lot of politicians in the province that I'm in right now have manipulated, often fueled separatist sentiment based on erroneous facts. And, you know, a lot of people do have legitimate grievances. They want to see equalization, for example, modified so that Quebec Hydro is included in the formula. But also a lot of people completely misunderstand how equalization works, and they're upset about something that just actually is not true. Yeah. On the U.S. side of things, it is very unusual to now see an American administration basically kind of say, well, we share a lot in common with Alberta, this province, and they would be welcome to be the 51st state, and kind of see to fuel that movement. In the past, and Chantal referred to it, you know, Ottawa had spoken to the United States, had spoken to France about, you know, recognition of a potential, the result of a potential yes vote in Quebec. That is not the same thing at all. And I do think, though, that Andrew is correct, that the wider frame, the CUSMA negotiations are trying to destabilize politics in this country, is also what the Americans are after. And so we're kind of playing in their hand by playing in this frame.
Yeah, I will say, just for the Premier of Alberta, she sort of blamed Justin Trudeau for the state of where the province is with the issue of separation. I'm not saying that's accurate, but that's where she put the onus or the blame. But Chantal, on Althea's point about this sort of playing into the Americans, the administration's hands when it comes to destabilizing things, what do you do then?
Well, two things. In the case of Quebec, the more the Americans are interested in breaking up the country, the less good it is for the sovereignty movement. Yeah. There is not here a constituency for MAGA that is behind the sovereignty movement. In the case of Alberta, I believe that's also the same. I believe the vast majority of Albertans, including those that would like to vote yes in a referendum. And by the way, the prospect of one in Alberta is much closer than in Quebec. The Premier, whatever she may say, has facilitated this every step of the way and has promised that if the petition to ask for one meets the threshold in May, she will hold one in 2026. But in the case of Alberta, I believe the vast majority of Albertans, but those who would like to use this to send a message to Ottawa, will shy away from voting yes because of the notion that there is a constituency behind that movement that really is interested in becoming an American state.
Last 30 seconds to you, Andrew.
Well, just to reinforce the point about everything Donald Trump touches, he has this sort of reverse Midas touch. The right wing in Europe is running away from him as fast as they can, certainly post-Greenland, because they can see that he's toxic to their choices. If you look at public opinion in the United States, there's a big surge now in support for free trade, support for immigration, all because Trump has shown people what the alternative looks like. And if we're lucky, we may have the same impact here, that the prospect of being associated with Trump in any way is so poisonous to the chances of secessionists in either Alberta or or Quebec, that it may redound to Canada's favor.
Okay, got to leave this there. Althea, you'll start us off on the next round because you're in Calgary, and we're going to talk about the Conservative Party convention and Pierre Poilievre's leadership review.
I'm going to keep on fighting for the Canadian people and their chance to have an affordable, safe future.
So will the Conservative leader get the support he needs from party faithful? What will be his message to the party and the country? That's next. At issue, Conservative leadership. Pierre Poilievre is facing a review of his leadership after losing the last election. While he's expected to survive the review, he will also need to send a message to Canadians about what he stands for.
We don't need more signing ceremonies, more summits, more laws, more agencies, more corporate buzzwords, or more abracadabra. What we need from this Prime Minister is one thing: get out of the way.
So, will Pierre Poilievre get the support he needs tomorrow? What does he need to say to supporters? Let's bring everyone back. Chantal, Andrew, Althea. Althea, you're already in Calgary. What are you going to be watching for tomorrow night?
Well, the Prime Minister, the leader, the official opposition's speech. Yeah. And of course, the big drama of the weekend is what is the number that Pierre Poilievre gets. So the speech is before the vote, and so the speech will be really directed at that room. Now, to be clear, most of the people who were selected as delegates, so every riding association was allowed to send 10 delegates, basically had to pledge their support to Pierre Poilievre to get here. That doesn't mean that the entire room here is supportive of Pierre Poilievre. I have spoken to people who are not. But it would be quite surprising if Pierre Poilievre does not meet the threshold that he won the Conservative leadership by in 2022, which is just under 71%. The goal is to have him win by above 85%. That's Stephen Harper got 84% in 2005. Mark Carney in the Liberal leadership win, roughly 87%. They want to come out of this completely united. I think the framing, some of the hunger in the room is about, we lost last time, how do we make sure that we win this time? So a lot of people will be looking for that in Pierre Poilievre's speech. From what I understand of the speech, I don't know that they will find it there. But the party is really trying to hammer this generational divide that Mark Carney is focused with people who, have already quite large RSPs and are worried about the future, but we should really be worried about children to make sure that they have the same opportunities that the boomers have and young people. And so I think that is a divide that we're going to see more and more, not just this convention, but in the House of Commons as the weeks go on too.
Andrew, what are you going to be watching for? Obviously the number, but beyond that.
Well, they're in a bit of a predicament. The Conservatives have a very high floor and a very low ceiling on their support. It's hard for them to get less than 35% of the vote. It's hard for them to get more than 40. Pierre Poilievre is not only responsible for that, but he's part of it. He very much appeals to Conservatives in the base. He very much turns off people outside the base. The problem they've got is, one, it's not clear there's anybody better waiting in the wings that they could reach for if Poilievre were decommissioned. And secondly, it's not at all clear that even if you got a better leader, that you could persuade a lot of those votes that went back to the Liberals after after Justin Trudeau's departure to look at the Conservatives again. Because right now, those voters, those swing voters between the Conservatives and the Liberals, seem pretty happy with Mark Carney. So I think they will opt, as probably they should, to stick with the devil they know, especially if they've got an election coming.
Yeah, I mean, who knows if there's an election coming? I think that is also helpful for Conservatives to believe, right, as they head into this vote and to spread. But Chantal, give me your read on what we might see.
I think it's not prudent to be, and I've seen those numbers, so it's not just us, it's not prudent to start talking about 80% plus. Why? Because if you get it, you want it to look like you did really well. And if you don't get it, and you get 78, people are going to say, well, he wanted 85%, which I have to say sounds high. A number of people who are making their way to the convention did pledge allegiance to Pierre Poilievre to get to the convention, but that doesn't mean that they're going to vote for him. No, so that's one thing. The other thing is, I think that the Conservatives desperately need the NDP to come back if they're going to have a shot under any leader. And that poll, the Léger poll that came out this week, was devastating on that score. Because what did it show? It showed that the Liberals were in majority territory, not because the Conservatives were losing at their floor, they're not losing their base, but because the NDP and the Bloc were losing support. Yeah. And unless the NDP, and I'm not sure, looking at the leadership race, that's going to happen, as long as people are minded on deciding who's going to be prime minister and not who will have influence on the prime minister, I think the Conservatives under any leader will have a problem.
Althea? Yeah, two things.
Oh, sorry, Andrew, and then Althea. Yeah, go ahead, Andrew.
Two things will scare NDP voters, are scaring NDP voters into the Liberal camp. One is Donald Trump. And as long as Trump is hovering on the horizon, that's going to be a factor and a problem for the Conservatives. The other, till now at least, has been Pierre Poilievre, partly because people don't think he can stand up to Trump enough, partly because it's just in his own right. He, if he's going to stay on as leader, if he's going to resolve that contradiction, has to present a different face than he has in the past. He has to be less scary to left of center voters, and he has to be more willing to show his defiance and opposition to Donald Trump. I think we've been starting to see, if I can say, a slightly more statesman-like Pierre Poilievre in the last couple of weeks. Maybe, assuming he gets this leadership monkey off his back, maybe we'll start to see him looking a bit more like a prime minister.
I mean, and the Donald Trump factor for him is real here too, Althea, because that's what's attracting so many people to Mark Carney, to the prime minister.
So many Conservatives actually like Mark Carney. And maybe they didn't vote for him last election, but they are openly saying that they would vote for him if there was an election now because they think he's the right man to face off against Donald Trump. I agree with everything that Andrew said. The problem with Pierre Poilievre is he pulls so far below his actual party. And the longer that he is there and that progressives fear him, the more we have a two-party system. That being said, the Prime Minister will have to make a bunch of decisions. He has made a lot of announcements and he has been pleasing everybody. So there will be, the longer Mark Carney is in power, a record of people being disappointed. And as long as Pierre Poilievre can try to survive that train, because frankly, right now, he benefits from a lot of people who want his job sitting on sideline thinking he can be the Thomas Mulcair, he can be the prosecutor and the leader of the official opposition. And by the time people are tired with Mark Carney, there will be a new leadership race and I can run again.
Okay.
Or I can run for the first time.
Yeah, okay, I got to leave it there. Thank you all. That is it for At Issue on the National. We're going to keep talking, though, this time talking a little more specifically about the CUSMA review and the war of words this past week between Canada and the U.S. You can catch that on YouTube or the At Issue podcast. Now back to Erica in Vancouver.
And coming up, a musical performance based on shoveling snow.
You see the plow go by and you've got that dump of heavy snow at the end of your driveway.
The moment that inspired a winter protest song. Next, in our moment. This is Danny McNeil doing what many Canadians have been forced to do this winter, shoveling snow, and a lot of it. Motivated by the huge mounds piling up in his driveway after just clearing it, the Nova Scotia native wrote a song in protest, and that makes our moment.
I don't mind shoveling, to be completely honest. I find it kind of a meditative activity, but I would much rather be hanging out with my kids. Plow Just Went By is a song that I wrote. It is a little bit of I suppose, a sad, somber song. You see the plow go by and you've got that dump of heavy snow at the end of your driveway. It's probably 3 or 4 hours of shoveling to do. I started writing it a few years ago during what we called Snowmageddon, when we got 150 centimeters of snow in Cape Breton. We were just getting pelted. The kids loved it and they loved the plow. And every time the plow went by, they would run to the window and they would wave to the plow. And like it says in the song, you know, I've got a bad back, you know what I mean? And your dad's back is bad at 35. It's more of a song about, you know, life's responsibilities that are pulling us away from our family. Hopefully next song I write about shoveling, it'll be a song about my kids shoveling for me.
Well, he may have to wait a while for that since his twins are just 3 years old. But nobody tell Danny, Environment Canada is forecasting more snow for Monday, so he may well be out shoveling again. From all of us at The National, thank you for being with us. I'm Erica Johnson in Vancouver. Take care.